Galactic historians mark it as Day Zero of the new era, the day humanity stopped pretending to be weak. Ambassador Julian Cross stood before the Grand Assembly, his weathered hand steady, as he placed a single device on the speaker's podium. The assembled representatives of 63 species watched with the same bored attention they had shown human diplomats for 4 centuries. Behind Julian, massive screens displayed the horror that had finally broken humanity's infinite patience. The Drachmori Empire had publicly executed 3,000 human civilians during what was supposed to be a peace negotiation. Men, women, and children vaporized while their captors laughed. The message was clear: human life meant nothing to the galaxy's predators. Emperor Vextar himself had attended this session, his massive reptilian form dominating the Drachmori delegation. His scarred hide bore the marks of countless conquests, and his eyes gleamed with the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. When Julian began to speak, Vextar's translator was already chuckling. "Honored delegates," Julian's voice carried across the vast chamber with practiced calm. "For 400 years, humanity has served this assembly as mediators, peacekeepers, and negotiators. We have believed that reason could triumph over violence, that patience could overcome aggression." Vextar's massive head tilted mockingly. "The soft flesh speaks of patience as if it were a virtue. Your species has had 4 centuries to claim what you wanted through strength. Instead, you chose to beg and plead like the prey animals you are." The chamber filled with the clicking, hissing, and chirping sounds that passed for laughter among various species. Humanity's reputation for endless diplomacy had become a galaxy-wide joke. Every species knew that humans would negotiate rather than fight, would seek compromise rather than victory. Julian nodded calmly. "You are correct, Emperor. Humanity has chosen restraint over aggression. We have chosen to build rather than destroy. We have chosen to heal rather than harm." His fingers moved to the device on the podium. "The Drachmori Empire has made it clear that they view this choice as weakness." "Because it is weakness," Vextar roared, rising to his full 3-meter height. "You have vast territories, rich worlds, advanced technology, yet you refuse to use your advantages. You are evolutionary failures, unfit to hold what you possess." The other delegates murmured agreement. The crystalline Vorthani representatives chimed their approval. The gaseous nebulari swirled with anticipation. Even humanity's few allies among the herbivorous gentle ones looked away in embarrassment. Everyone knew that humans would respond to this latest massacre with another strongly worded resolution and economic sanctions. Julian's thumb hovered over the device's activation switch. "The Drachmori leadership has stated repeatedly that human mercy is a sign of genetic inferiority. They have declared that our preference for peace proves we are unworthy of survival. Today, they have demonstrated their commitment to this philosophy by murdering 3,000 civilians during negotiations for their release." "Worthless prey," Vextar snarled. "Your species lacks the killer instinct necessary for galactic dominance. You will be consumed by those strong enough to take what they desire." The chamber fell silent as Julian pressed the activation switch. The device projected a holographic display showing the current positions of every ship in known space. Red markers indicated Drachmori vessels. Blue markers showed human positions. For the first time in 4 centuries, the Assembly was seeing humanity's true military deployment. The silence stretched as delegates processed what they were seeing. There weren't supposed to be human ships in most of those locations. According to Galactic intelligence, humanity maintained a modest defense fleet focused on patrol and rescue operations. "This display shows the actual position of the human defense network," Julian announced, his voice cutting through the shocked whispers. "For 400 years, we have allowed other species to monitor what we wanted them to see. Today, you see the truth." The display updated in real time as thousands of additional markers appeared. Human ships emerging from stealth positions throughout the galaxy. Hidden bases activating across hundreds of systems. Manufacturing centers that had been disguised as civilian colonies revealing their true purpose. Vextar's confident expression wavered as reports flooded in from Drachmori intelligence networks. Entire human fleets were appearing on sensors where empty space had existed moments before. "Impossible," he growled. Our surveillance networks monitor all human military activities. You have monitored what we allowed you to monitor, Julian replied. Every species in this galaxy has underestimated humanity because we chose diplomacy over warfare. You mistook our patience for weakness. You confused our preference for peace with inability to wage war. The device chirped softly. Julian spoke into its communicator with the same calm tone he had used for decades of negotiations. Fleet Admiral Stone, this is Ambassador Cross. Execute Red Dawn Protocol. All restraints are removed. Show them what happens when humans stop holding back. The chamber erupted in panicked communications as delegates contacted their homeworlds. The display showed human fleets moving with impossible coordination toward every Drakmori position simultaneously. 4 centuries of careful preparation was being unleashed in a single moment. Emperor Vextar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. His mighty empire, which had conquered dozens of species, was about to face an enemy that had been pretending to be weak, while secretly preparing for total war. Julian closed the communicator and looked directly at the Emperor. Today the galaxy learns why humans were truly the perfect mediators. We understood the price of violence because we were always capable of paying it. Fleet Admiral Rebecca Stone had waited 4 centuries for this moment. Deep within the hidden command station, known only as the Vault, she watched as humanity's greatest deception finally came to an end. The station itself was a marvel of concealment, built inside a hollowed-out asteroid that had been carefully positioned in an unremarkable region of space 200 years ago. Around her, thousands of officers worked at stations that officially didn't exist. The Human Defense Network had been the galaxy's best-kept secret, maintained by generations of military personnel who had lived their entire careers in shadow. Today, they would finally step into the light. Admiral, we have confirmation from Ambassador Cross, reported Captain Diana Ross, her voice tight with anticipation. Red Dawn Protocol is active. All fleets are standing by for your command. Rebecca nodded, her fingers dancing across the master control console. The screens around her showed the true scope of humanity's military might. Ghost fleets that had been hiding in the void between stars for decades. Civilian ships that were about to reveal their true nature. Manufacturing centers disguised as farming colonies preparing to unleash hell itself. Open channels to all fleet commanders, Rebecca ordered. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity really looks like when we stop pretending to be harmless. The first revelation came at the Kepler trade station, where a routine human cargo convoy suddenly transformed before the eyes of shocked alien observers. The 5 transport ships that had been carrying agricultural supplies for the past 3 years simultaneously deployed weapons arrays that shouldn't have existed. Their hulls reconfigured as hidden armor plating emerged, and what had appeared to be cargo containers revealed themselves as fighter launch bays. Captain Marcus Torres commanded the lead vessel, the merchant ship Peaceful Harvest. For 15 years he had played the role of a simple trader, building relationships with alien customers who saw him as another harmless human. Now his ship's true identity was unveiled as the dreadnought Thunder of Terra. All stations, this is Fleet Command, Rebecca's voice echoed through the hidden networks. Phase 1 is complete. Begin Phase 2 deployment. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on thousands of worlds. Human colonies that had seemed defenseless suddenly bristled with planetary defense systems that emerged from underground installations. Space stations that had provided humanitarian aid for decades revealed themselves as fortress-class military installations. The Drakmori intelligence networks went into overdrive, trying to understand how they had been so completely deceived. Emperor Vextar's military advisors frantically updated their threat assessments as impossible numbers flashed across their screens. My lord, General Krathvor reported, his voice shaking. Our estimates of human military capacity were incorrect, catastrophically incorrect. Vextar stared at the tactical display showing Drakmori space. Red markers indicating human forces now surrounded every major Drakmori world. Ships that had appeared from nowhere were taking positions with mathematical precision. How many ships do they actually have? We estimate 40,000 combat vessels, my lord. Perhaps more. Our intelligence services have been monitoring decoys for 4 centuries. The Emperor's claws scraped against his command throne. The Drakmori Empire possessed 12,000 ships, considered one of the largest fleets in known space. They had built their conquests on the assumption that no single species could match their military might. On Earth, Director Patricia Morgan stood in the Global Defense Command Center, watching as humanity's secret was finally revealed. She had inherited this deception from her predecessors, guardians of a truth that had shaped 4 centuries of human policy. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Colonel James Wright, "all deep space installations are coming online. The Aurora defense platform is ready for combat operations." The Aurora platform was humanity's crown jewel, a space station the size of a small moon that had been constructed in complete secrecy over the past century. Its existence alone would have shifted the galactic balance of power, but it was only one of 12 such installations scattered throughout human space. Back aboard Thunder of Terra, Captain Torres opened communications with the Drakmori battle group that had been shadowing his convoy for weeks. The same aliens who had treated him with casual contempt now found themselves staring at weapon signatures they couldn't comprehend. "Drakmori vessels, this is Captain Torres of the Human Stellar Navy. You have been operating in human space without authorization. You have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal, or you will be considered hostile." The response came in the form of disruptor fire as the Drakmori commander chose aggression over retreat. It was a mistake that lasted exactly 17 seconds. The Thunder of Terra's main batteries spoke once, and the Drakmori flagship simply ceased to exist. Admiral Stone watched the engagement data flow across her screens. 17 seconds. That was how long it took for a single human ship to destroy a Drakmori heavy cruiser that had terrorized 3-star systems. "Admiral," Captain Ross reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from multiple Drakmori squadrons. They're requesting immediate withdrawal from human space." "Denied," Rebecca replied without hesitation. The Drakmori Empire declared that human mercy was weakness. Today they learned the price of that philosophy. All Drakmori military forces are to be considered hostile until they surrender unconditionally. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as 4 centuries of assumptions crumbled within hours. The peaceful humans who had mediated disputes and provided humanitarian aid revealed themselves as the most militarily advanced species in known space. On the crystalline world of Vorth Prime, the Vorthani Council held an emergency session. These silicon-based lifeforms had considered themselves the galaxy's technological leaders. Now they watched human ships deploying weapons that operated on principles they couldn't understand. "The humans have been deceiving us for 400 years, chimed Council Leader Thaisara. "Every negotiation, every treaty, every diplomatic meeting was conducted while they possessed overwhelming military superiority. The implications were staggering. Humanity had chosen diplomacy while holding the power to simply take whatever they wanted. They had suffered insults, accepted unfavorable treaties, and endured mockery while possessing the ability to conquer the entire galaxy. Emperor Vextar made one final desperate gambit. He ordered the execution of every human prisoner in Drakmori space, hoping to provoke an emotional response that might create tactical opportunities. It was the last mistake his empire would ever make. Admiral Stone's expression never changed as she received the reports. 27,000 human civilians murdered in the span of an hour. The number was added to a ledger that humanity had been keeping for 4 centuries. "Signal all fleet commanders," she ordered, her voice colder than the vacuum of space. "The Drakmori Empire has chosen extinction. Show them what mercy looks like when it finally runs out." Galactic historians would later call it the fastest total war in recorded history. What the Drakmori Empire had built over 8 centuries of conquest was dismantled in exactly 72 hours, 17 minutes, and 34 seconds. General Nathan Pierce led the ground forces that would be remembered as the Liberation Corps, but even he was amazed by the precision of humanity's long-planned response. The assault began simultaneously across 500 Drakmori systems. Admiral Stone's strategy was brutally simple. Every Drakmori military installation would be destroyed within the first hour, followed by the systematic liberation of every enslaved world. There would be no negotiations, No mercy, and no survivors among those who had chosen to murder human civilians. General Pierce stood aboard the assault ship Freedom's Price, watching as his forces prepared for the largest military operation in human history. Around him, soldiers who had trained in secret for decades finally wore their true uniforms. The Liberation Corps existed to free enslaved populations across the galaxy, but they had never been allowed to act until now. "General," reported Colonel Martha Webb, "the first wave has achieved complete success. Drakmori naval yards at Vex Prime have been eliminated. No survivors." Pierce nodded grimly. The Drakmori had made their choice when they executed 27,000 human civilians. Today, humanity would show the galaxy what happened when a species dedicated to peace finally chose war. On the bridge of the dreadnought Wrath of Earth, Commander Lisa Park watched as her ship's quantum cannons carved through Drakmori battle formations like a blade through smoke. The weapons represented 4 centuries of secret research, technologies that made current galactic standards obsolete. "Target the command ship," she ordered, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were accomplishing. "Make sure Emperor Vextar sees this." The quantum beam struck the Drakmori flagship with impossible precision. The massive vessel, pride of the Empire's fleet, folded in on itself as its molecular structure collapsed. Emperor Vextar had exactly enough time to understand what was happening before his ship became a rapidly expanding cloud of particles. The psychological effect on Drakmori forces was immediate and devastating. Their emperor, their fleets, their mighty fortress worlds were being systematically erased by an enemy they had dismissed as weak. Panic spread through their ranks as unit after unit reported impossible losses. General Pierce's ground forces began their work on the slave worlds. These operations required different skills than space combat: precision strikes to disable Drakmori, control systems while protecting the enslaved populations. Humanity had spent centuries studying every Drakmori installation, every guard post, every control mechanism. On the mining world of Kethvar, Major Daniel Cross led his battalion through the underground facilities where 50,000 beings from 12 species had been forced to extract rare minerals. The liberation took exactly 18 minutes with 0 civilian casualties. "This is Major Cross to all enslaved personnel," his voice echoed through the facility's communication system. "You are now under the protection of the Human Liberation Corps. Medical teams are en route. You are free." The response was a sound that would haunt the Major for the rest of his life. 50,000 voices crying out in relief, disbelief, and joy. Some of these beings had been slaves for generations, never expecting to see freedom again. Similar scenes played out across hundreds of worlds as Pierce's forces methodically freed every enslaved population in Drakmori space. The Corps had prepared for this moment with surgical precision, knowing exactly which facilities to hit and how to minimize civilian casualties. The galaxy's other major powers watched in terror as humanity demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible. The Zynthian Confederacy, which controlled nearly as much territory as the former Drakmori Empire, held emergency sessions to assess their own vulnerability. President Cax Thule of the Confederacy stared at intelligence reports that made no sense. "How do they move their fleet so quickly? Our fastest ships require days to cross the distances they cover in hours." His military advisor, General Vorthak, could only shake his massive insectoid head. "Unknown, Mr. President. Their technology appears to be centuries ahead of anything we possess, perhaps millennia." The truth was simpler than they imagined. Humanity had never stopped advancing their technology. While other species had grown comfortable with their achievements, humans had continued to push the boundaries of physics, engineering, and military science. They had simply chosen not to reveal their progress. Admiral Stone monitored the campaign from her command center, watching as the Drakmori Empire collapsed in real time. Her forces were operating with efficiency that bordered on the supernatural, but it was really just the result of 4 centuries of careful planning. "Admiral," reported Captain Ross, "Drakmori High Command is requesting immediate armistice negotiations. They're offering complete surrender." Stone's expression never changed. Inform them that the Drakmori Empire no longer exists as a political entity. Individual Drakmori may surrender to prevent their execution, but there will be no negotiations with their leadership. The finality of her words rippled through galactic communication networks. Humanity wasn't just defeating the Drakmori Empire, they were erasing it completely. Every military installation, every command structure, every symbol of Drakmori power was being systematically destroyed. On Earth, Director Morgan received hourly updates on the campaign's progress. The numbers were staggering. 3 million enslaved beings liberated, 800 Drakmori military installations destroyed, 12,000 enemy ships eliminated. Human casualties were limited to minor injuries from equipment failures. "Ma'am," reported Colonel Wright, "we're receiving communication requests from 47 different species. They all want to discuss their current relationships with humanity." Morgan allowed herself a thin smile. The galaxy was finally understanding what humanity had always known. Peace was only possible when backed by overwhelming strength. 4 centuries of playing the role of harmless mediators was ending, and the true nature of human power was being revealed. General Pierce's forces completed their final liberation operation on the fortress world of Drakmor itself. The planet that had served as the Empire's capital for 8 centuries fell in 6 hours. The massive slave pens that had held over 200,000 beings were opened, and freedom rang across a world that had known only tyranny. As the 72nd hour approached, Admiral Stone prepared to address the galaxy. The Drakmori Empire was gone, their fleets destroyed, their leaders dead, their slaves freed. But this was only the beginning of humanity's new role in galactic affairs. "Open channels to all major governments," she ordered. "It's time to explain the new reality." The message that followed would reshape galactic civilization. The species that had been humanity's partners in peace would remain so. Those who had shown hostility would face the same fate as the Drakmori. The age of human restraint was over, and the galaxy would learn to live under the protection of a species that preferred peace, but was unmatched in war. The Galactic Assembly Hall had never witnessed such silence. Ambassador Julian Cross stood at the same podium where, 72 hours earlier, he had announced the end of human restraint. Now he faced the shattered remnants of galactic civilization, representatives of species who finally understood the true balance of power in the universe. The great chamber that once housed 63 species now held only 41. The Drakmori Empire was gone, completely erased from existence. Their allies, the Vekthari Dominion and the Skullmoth Horde, had surrendered unconditionally after witnessing humanity's display of overwhelming force. 22 civilizations had simply ceased to exist as political entities within 3 days. Behind Julian, holographic displays showed the aftermath of humanity's reckoning. Former Drakmori slave worlds were now under human protection, their populations receiving medical care, education, and the freedom to determine their own futures. The galaxy's largest refugee crisis had become its greatest liberation in a matter of hours. Supreme Chancellor Thirsak of the surviving Galactic Council stepped forward, his crystalline form trembling with barely contained fear. For 8 centuries, his species had considered themselves the galaxy's intellectual superiors. Now they begged for humanity's mercy. "Ambassador Cross," Thirsak's voice resonated through the chamber. "The Council formally requests clarification of humanity's intentions. Regarding the remaining civilizations, we wish to understand our place in this new order." Julian's expression remained as calm as it had been during 4 centuries of diplomatic negotiations. The same patience that had once been mocked as weakness now carried the weight of absolute authority. Behind him, the liberated beings from hundreds of worlds watched their former captors grovel before their human saviors. "The human position is simple," Julian replied, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Species that have coexisted peacefully with humanity will continue to do so. Those that have shown hostility toward human civilians will face judgment." The word sent ripples of terror through the assembled delegates. Judgment was a human concept that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. It meant the complete evaluation of a species' actions over the past 4 centuries, with consequences determined by humanity's newly revealed moral authority. Justice Minister Catherine Vale, Julian's daughter, stepped forward carrying the archive of grievances. This document represented 400 years of carefully recorded atrocities, insults, and acts of aggression that humanity had endured while maintaining their facade of weakness. The Zektaran Consortium, she announced, reading from the archive, enslaved human traders in the Outer Rim for 6 decades. Response: the consortium's military assets have been confiscated and redistributed to their former victims. The consortium may continue to exist as a civilian trading organization under human oversight. Delegate Vexmore of the Zektaran species collapsed into his chair. His civilization's mighty war fleets, built over centuries of conquest, had been taken from them in a single day. They were now a protectorate under human authority. Their freedom depended on their future behavior. The Gorthani raiders, Catherine continued, attacked human medical ships providing humanitarian aid. Response: the Gorthani homeworld has been evacuated and designated as a memorial to their victims. The species has been relocated to supervised colonies where they will learn the value of peaceful coexistence. One by one, the reckoning continued. Species that had shown aggression toward humanity discovered that their actions had consequences they never imagined. The humans had been keeping score for 4 centuries, and payment was now due. Admiral Stone appeared via hologram from her command station, her presence causing visible fear among the assembled delegates. The architect of the 72-hour war now stood as humanity's supreme military authority, the guardian of galactic peace through overwhelming strength. "Let me be clear about humanity's new role," Stone announced, her voice cutting through the chamber's fearful whispers. "We did not seek galactic dominance. It was forced upon us by species who mistook our patience for weakness. The galaxy's predators have learned that humanity's mercy had limits. The transformation was complete. The species that had spent 4 centuries as humble mediators now stood revealed as the galaxy's ultimate arbiters of justice. Every civilization present understood that their continued existence depended on human approval. Emperor Caxthul of Ea, the Zynthian Confederacy, one of the few major powers to survive the reckoning, stepped forward with visible effort. His insectoid form shook as he spoke words that would echo through galactic history. The Zynthian Confederacy formally recognizes human authority over galactic affairs. We request the honor of serving as humanity's partners in maintaining peace throughout the galaxy. It was a complete surrender disguised as diplomacy. The Confederacy, which had once considered itself humanity's equal, now begged for the privilege of serving as human auxiliaries. Julian nodded approvingly. The Confederacy has maintained peaceful relations with humanity throughout our shared history. Your offer is accepted. You will serve as regional administrators under human oversight, ensuring that the mistakes of the past 4 centuries are never repeated. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through territorial expansion. They had assumed responsibility for it through moral authority. Every surviving species now existed under human protection, their futures dependent on their willingness to embrace the peace that humanity had always offered. General Pierce's voice joined the proceedings via communication link from the former Drakmori capital world. The Liberation Corps has completed its mission across all former Imperial territories. 3.7 million beings have been freed from slavery. Medical and educational facilities are being established on every liberated world. The numbers were staggering. In 72 hours, humanity had accomplished what centuries of galactic diplomacy had failed to achieve. They had ended the largest slave trade in known history, toppled the galaxy's most aggressive empire, and established a new order based on the principles they had always advocated. Minister Vale continued reading from the archive, her voice growing stronger with each pronouncement. The following species have maintained peaceful relations with humanity and will continue as autonomous partners: the Gentle Ones of Serenity Prime, the Crystal Singers of Harmony Station, the Deep Thinkers of the Wisdom Worlds. These species, ridiculed by the galaxy's predators as weak and useless, now found themselves as humanity's favored allies. Their commitment to peace and learning, had earned them a privileged position in the new galactic order. The reckoning concluded, with Julian's final pronouncement. The never-again doctrine is now in effect. No species will be enslaved. No civilian population will be targeted. No act of aggression will go unanswered. Humanity has assumed the responsibility we always knew we might need to accept. As the session ended, the surviving delegates filed out in stunned silence. The galaxy they had known was gone, replaced by a new order where humanity's moral authority was backed by absolute military supremacy. The age of human restraint was over. The age of human responsibility had begun. 10 years had passed since the day, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the chaotic battleground of the old era. Ambassador Julian Cross, now bearing the title of Galactic Coordinator, stood in the Memorial Garden on New Geneva Station, watching ships from dozens of species dock peacefully at what had once been humanity's most contested border post. The memorial itself was a testament to humanity's long journey from patient mediators to galactic guardians. Crystalline walls bore the names of every human civilian killed during the 4 centuries of restraint, their sacrifice finally given meaning by the peace that followed. At the center stood a simple inscription. They died so others might live free. Julian's reflection was interrupted by the arrival of Minister Catherine Vale, who had traded her role as Justice Minister for the more demanding position of Galactic Development Coordinator. Her responsibilities now included overseeing the rehabilitation of former aggressive species and the integration of newly liberated populations. Father, Catherine said, using the informal address that had become acceptable in the new era. The quarterly report from the Reformation Worlds shows remarkable progress. The former Gorthani raiders have completed their 3rd year without a single act of violence. Their children are attending integrated schools with other species. Julian nodded with satisfaction. The Reformation program had been humanity's most ambitious project, transforming entire species from predatory cultures into peaceful societies. It had required patience, resources, and the constant threat of overwhelming force, but the results spoke for themselves. In the harbor beyond the memorial, a massive transport ship bearing Xinthian Confederacy markings was unloading medical supplies destined for the Outer Rim colonies. Emperor Caxthul's descendants had proven themselves valuable partners in humanity's mission, using their species' natural organization skills to coordinate relief efforts across hundreds of worlds. Admiral Stone, now bearing the title of Galactic Defense Coordinator, materialized as a hologram beside them. Even in her 70s, she commanded respect that bordered on reverence throughout the galaxy. The architect of the 72-hour war had spent the past decade ensuring that no species would ever again threaten galactic peace. Julian, Catherine, Stone nodded to each in turn. I wanted to personally deliver the news from the Deep Survey Division. Our exploration fleets have made contact with 3 new species beyond the galactic rim. All have requested immediate admission to the Human Protectorate. The news was hardly surprising. Word of humanity's protection had spread beyond the known galaxy, drawing species fleeing from conflicts in distant star clusters. The Human Protectorate now encompassed over 200 civilizations, all living under the guarantee that their peaceful existence would be defended by overwhelming force. Catherine smiled at the report. Any aggressive species among the new contacts? Stone's expression grew slightly colder. 1. The Vraktar Empire attempted to demand tribute from our survey fleet. They no longer exist as a political entity. The casual way she delivered the news demonstrated how completely the galaxy had changed. Aggressive species were no longer tolerated, negotiated with, or given multiple chances to reform. They were simply removed from existence with surgical precision. Their former territories converted into memorial sites for their victims. Julian walked to the memorial's central monument, where a quantum flame burned eternally in honor of all who had died under the old system. The flame had been lit using energy from the destroyed Drakmori homeworld, a reminder that justice had finally been served. Do you ever wonder, he asked quietly, if we could have found another way? If 4 centuries of patience might have eventually succeeded without the need for force? Catherine joined him at the flame, her expression thoughtful. The liberation. Corps freed over 50 million enslaved beings in the first year alone. Millions more have been born free who would have lived in chains under the old system. How many lives is diplomatic patience worth? The question had haunted human leadership. For a decade, the moral weight of their decision to abandon restraint was balanced against the undeniable results. Slavery had been eliminated. Aggressive warfare had ended. Peaceful species flourished under human protection. The galaxy had never known such prosperity or security. Admiral Stone's hologram flickered as she received an incoming message. I need to coordinate the response to a minor situation in the Zeta sector. 3 species are having a territorial dispute. Standard protocol, we'll mediate first, but any species that refuses our arbitration will find their military capabilities limited. As Stone's image faded, Julian reflected on how completely humanity's role had evolved. They were no longer just mediators offering suggestions. They were arbitrators whose decisions carried the weight of absolute authority. The galaxy's conflicts were resolved not through negotiation between equals, but through human judgment backed by unquestioned military supremacy. A group of young beings from various species approached the memorial, led by their human teacher. The integration education program ensured that every child in the galaxy learned the history of the day and the principles that now governed galactic civilization. Professor Williams, one of the students, a young Xinthian, asked with genuine curiosity, why did the humans wait so long to use their power? Why did they let bad things happen for 400 years? Professor David Williams knelt to the child's level, his expression gentle but serious. Because they hoped that other species would choose to be good without being forced. They believed that beings could learn to be peaceful through example and patience. When that hope was proven wrong, they did what was necessary to protect the innocent. The lesson was simple but profound. Humanity had offered the galaxy a choice between voluntary peace and enforced peace. When voluntary peace failed, enforced peace became the only option. As the educational group moved on, Julian found himself approached by an elderly Zektaran trader named Vothrek. The creature's species had once enslaved human merchants, but now they served as valued partners in galactic commerce under human oversight. Coordinator Cross, Vothrek said with the deep respect that had replaced the contempt of the old era, I wanted to thank you for what humanity has given us. My children will never know the fear that defined my generation. They will grow up in a galaxy where strength protects the weak instead of preying upon them. Julian accepted the thanks with grace, though part of him wondered if gratitude born from fear was truly meaningful. The galaxy respected humanity now, but was it the respect of equals or the submission of the conquered? Catherine seemed to read his thoughts. The former slaves don't care whether their freedom came from negotiation or force. They care that it came at all. The children being born today will grow up in a galaxy that we can barely imagine. One where war between species is literally impossible because humanity prevents it. As the day cycle ended on New Geneva Station, Julian made his way to his private quarters, where he maintained a small shrine to the humans who had died before the day. Their sacrifice had made possible a galaxy where no child would be sold into slavery, no peaceful species would face extinction, and no aggressor would go unpunished. The transformation was complete. Humanity had evolved from patient diplomats to cosmic guardians, their moral authority absolute and their military power unquestioned. The galaxy lived in peace not because its inhabitants had chosen virtue, but because humanity had chosen to make virtue the only viable option. In the end, Julian reflected, perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. The day humans stopped holding back had become the day the galaxy learned that some forms of peace could only be achieved through the threat of overwhelming force. It was a lesson that would never need to be taught again. The new galaxy was safe, prosperous, and free. It was also absolutely, unquestionably, and eternally under human control.